Hello everybody, welcome to Tuesday's Transformational Tip. Kimberly here. Today I wanted to talk to you guys about something that has been on my mind for about 25 years. And I've gone back and forth on this so many times. And it's about destiny and free will. Is there destiny? Is there free will? I have researched this so much. I have reflected on this. I've had certain, answers or realizations in deep meditations about this. And I always felt like there was some kind of flow that was already there. So kind of leaning towards destiny, if you will. And I did hear a Swami so many years ago, and I can't remember his name, and I can't find his name, and I'm sure he's passed by now. He was so old when I saw that video, and he said, live like you're in control, but know that you are not. And I thought, oh, there's something to that, because I always felt like there was a combination of the two somehow. I don't ever usually believe in one or the other. I usually believe that there's some kind of mix. Excuse me. So, I was watching Nassim Haramein on his show, Quantum Revolution. And for those of you who will never ever watch this because it gets really thick, it gets to be an information overload. Excuse me, if you're not really into it, which I am. And so in this, he explains, which is why I always felt, let me say this first, I've always felt that going back and getting a really useful perspective of what has happened to us in our past, I've always seen and felt a positive influence in my life. And I know a lot of people who think about manifestation. I always felt like, gee, excuse me, it's as if we think about, I am going to manifest something, I'm going to change something in my life, it's like we are isolating ourselves from the rest of the system, like from the rest of life, which to me felt like, well, how is that possible? How can we take ourselves out of the system and say, I'm going to do this and manifest something completely different in my life? Because we are in a system, a very complex system. And so how do we just isolate ourselves and take ourselves out? And from what he explains is, we can't take ourselves out in isolation and start changing things. There is a flow in the universe of experience in the Planck field. So let's just say experience. In experience, there's a flow. And life is a feedback loop. So everything is, our experience is learning from itself. We are learning from the past, from coordinates in space, which is time. So without getting complex and losing everyone who's not really interested in that, one of the ways that we can influence this flow, so we can't completely change that flow because it's not just us involved, it's the people around us, it is nature around us, it is the universe around us that is intertwined with our experience. So one of the ways that we can do it is if in this moment we can influence our lives locally, is what he says. And he says that we can use the way that we perceive the past and our past experience to influence that flow of the future, because the past and the present are all connected in the field. And so, although we can't isolate ourselves from the system, we can influence the flow within the system by, which is why I always say we need to go, which is why I do inner child work, which is why I go back and act like kind of a guardian to my child self And I've found such amazing shifts since I've been doing stuff like that. And so that's why it's happening. I found like a scientific reason to why things I do are working. And so he says, if you influence the way you perceive the past, the information of the past, you can influence the way the information organizes itself in your future. So we can't, like I said, isolate ourselves from the system, but we can influence the flow of the system. So for anyone who was ever wondering about that and who doesn't want to go through the science material, or who was kind of thinking and finds the science of it really long and dry, it's both. There is a flow and an interconnectedness that is way beyond our scope, we'll say. But we can, from this moment, choose to see our experience as useful. That's one of the really great ways to do it. And I've been talking about this on this channel forever. Looking at our experience as really useful, as it has what's gotten us here. And we can always take any optimistic way of seeing something at any point in time. And we notice right in that moment when we do that, the body just comes alive. The mind just wakes up. We start to feel different. We start to feel better. And that's how it influences the information in the future. So I'm a big fan of going back and changing my past. And I believe I've done a video on that. I've done so many, but I believe I've done a video on, yes, I did. I said that I believe that we can change our past. And so that's exactly what he was saying today. I believe it's episode 8 where he talks about this. And Quantum Revolution, if you want to go look at that, it's really, really, really interesting. But I just wanted to put that out there. I feel so relieved. Like, yes, I had this intuition that this is what it was. There's destiny and there's free will. There can't be one or the other. And then watching the results, if you will, or the feedback that I'm getting in my reality from doing work, like going back and being a guardian angel to my younger self as the future me back then. If you're following me, it gets to be like, woo! But it's all connected, and that's why I have such a difference in my energy when I do that kind of work. And I believe, how do we ultimately know if it's changing our future? But if we look at where we've been and it's different and we feel different and we have different people, if things are changing, that's a really great indication that we are influencing that flow. Now, things are going to change anyway because the system, it's a feedback loop. We are learning, we are evolving on our experience. And so, yes, our experience should show up differently than what our parents did because that's what's happening. The whole universe is in spin and it's in a feedback. So it's learning from itself all the way. So there's that. Plus, if we are learning from and having a really useful perspective of the information of the past, then we are influencing that flow for the information to arrange itself in a way that can be more in alignment with what we want. So you can see that manifestation is not as clear cut as what it's made to seem sometimes. Like, just ask for what you want and really feel into it and believe it. Yes, I think in doing that and having the intention to make things different, we start relating to ourselves differently. But what starts happening is things that are there that we are afraid to confront start popping up, and they start giving us an opportunity to look at them. And I think that's why, because that flow of the universe, that is the way the universe organizes itself. And so if we are trying to bypass that, it won't happen, because all of that, the past and the future, are connected. So if you're asking for a different future, you have to go back and get a different perspective on the past from this moment. That's why they talk about surrender in this moment and allowing things to be what they are in this moment. Because if we are in that moment, we're letting go of whatever we're clinching to from the past. So that's a different perspective on the information from the past. So yeah, go at it from this moment to change the perspective of what has happened, and then organize the information from the future differently so that we can have more of what we want and less of what we don't, knowing that there is a flow and we have to participate. We are participating in this much bigger system. It's not just us isolated in what we are trying to manifest. That's why I think in a lot of the intentions they say for the greater good of all. Because throughout time, we've known this stuff, but then we kind of isolate it out separately to kind of get a better grasp of what manifestation is, I think, and have a better understanding. Like, it's so much better if we can cut it in these little pieces and just do that. But I think there's a lot to remember, to consider, if we just remember from this moment. Being in a state of surrender is a way to influence the information from the future, but also actively getting a fresh, useful perspective on what has happened and how has it influenced me right now. Like, what good have I gotten from it? What usefulness have I gotten from it? What perspective have I gotten from the pains and the emotional trauma or whatever it is? We've all had them. But if we look at the usefulness of this stuff that we're carrying, we can start to let it go. First of all, like, let it just settle. Where does it go? It's still coordinates in space, which means it's still a memory, but it doesn't have to have the energetics that it has in affecting the information from the future. We can have a different perspective and look at it as useful. Even in the beginning, if it's tough to say, wow, that was good for me. We don't in the beginning look at trauma and say, oh, that was so good for me. No, in the beginning, we can look at it delicately and say, how has it been useful? How has it made me more aware? How has it made me more compassionate? How has it made me? We can start with baby steps and looking at the past, and then really confronting when we're ready the layers, the more subtle, the more, I would say, softer emotions that are involved in that trauma or that event. And then go deeper. And I talk about all the time the layers of emotional healing. When we do the layers of emotional healing, the perspective switches automatically from the information that we have from the past. It switches on its own. That's why I always say confronting our emotions for whatever we are trying to manifest, the opposite of that usually is hiding in there. It's repressed somewhere. And sometimes we express it. Those things are all attached. So it's the root of how we can make our future better. So yes, we can go into mindset, but I believe that we need to confront the emotional layers that are under everything. And then mindset starts to shift, and then perspective and starts to show up, and perceptions start to shift today. It affects today. And so getting through those layers, it is useful, and it does make a difference in our moment, which then affects the future path and everything that's involved in the future path. That's why we can't consider every action that we have all day long affects everything. And that's why it's not we're not isolated from the system of everything that's happening in the universe. So I really wanted to share that. I feel like, okay, I really got some explanation that makes sense. And there is deeper stuff to how the future and the past, the information is connected in the Planck field. but that's much deeper than I'm gonna go on here. And yeah, I just wanted to give you guys that much. You can go research it from Nassim Haramein. I just love his work. I love the way he sees things. I just love how he's unraveling and he's connecting consciousness and science and physics, and it's beautiful. Beautiful. You guys can go see that. It's Quantum Revolution is his show. And he also is on social, and he talks about a lot of this on social also. So that is it for Tuesday's transformational tip. I hope it wasn't too confusing. I'm really, really happy about that. So thanks for joining me, and I hope you feel as much relief as I do, because I really feel relieved to have an explanation of all of that. So join me next week for another episode, and I will see you then. Bye. Thank you.